Hi, my name's Emily P., and I plan on utterly changing this world through technology. How I plan to do so is going to be the topic of this speech. While not the most pertinent to an information security discussion, I do feel some vindication with sharing the stage with some of you. They say that a hacker is a person that overcomes challenges with their technical computing experience, and we have a lot of societal problems today that need inherent addressing. From our overwhelming wealth inequality, racial tensions, extremism in political polarized opinions, ecological degradation, and whispers of economic stagnation, and divisive tactics that has ripped this nation away from any ability to have a rational conversation about what we actually need to do to progress forward. To put it simply, we sure have a hell of a lot of issues to handle as a society. But we, as people, have created these problems, and so we, as people, have the ability to fix them. What we can utilize in this pursuit are some of the most cutting-edge, amazingly technologically empowering tools that we are capable of making. It is the creation of the most innovative ideas and the liberation of each individual to the greatest definitions of their own success that I ultimately seek with showing people how these technologies work. It comes from an obsession that stems from the fact that I know if we can put these tools that we love, learning computers and programming, modeling, and then integrate it further with tools like 3D printing, then we can absolutely blow away our understanding of what society is to be completely apart. Okay, so to be brief, during this, I'm basing this as part of the Industrial Revolution. We know that we saw the standard of living raised, there was an improvement in wages, and our lifespan doubled. And it began its first stages in 1760 to 1850. When we first began mass manufacturing, harvesting coal more effectively, and creating cheaper access to quality goods, these are the things attributed to this state. I like to see articles on this sometimes because I will see people just dismiss the individuals who did suffer during this time. Children climbing in mines to bring coal from underground on their hands and knees. They will say that these people, they'll use eloquent wording to describe these things, but I just reinterpret it in my head. This is what they sound like to me. They had access to this better version of society. It didn't matter that they were stuck in the gears that made it turn. They had access to it. They were living in it. They should have just been happy to be experiencing it and being along for the ride, right? Right. And it's true, the ability to eat a variety of foods like never before, the falling of the death rate and increased population, and cheaper access to good. These were all things correlated to this. But an 8 to 30% increase of wage was tied to a complete degradation of the quality of life experienced by moving into the city. They say that wages doubled from 1810 to 1850. That's 40 years. That's the lifespan of these people. They were stuck with these wages their entire lives. And people actually did live longer than 40. Most people who had basic access to food and medicine and were in a higher class tend to actually live towards the rate that we do today. But it was skewed by the fact that so many people did die so young. In fact, they say in Liverpool that the life expectancy fell to just 25 years in 1860. The middle class was created in the churn of countless individuals who toiled for 12 to 16 hours a day, but really the wage benefits, the health benefits, and the things that we praise the Industrial Revolution for, correlatable things to health, like a steady increase in height, these things didn't occur until the second portion of the Industrial Revolution, and for that, we dismiss countless individuals and their experiences. We brush over the Industrial Revolution, but just as a systematic wealth inequality in the United States today that claims the life of citizens 15 years earlier than those at the top, it seems it's a disease we never really got over. We never got over the dismissal of the suffering of these people because to us, they legitimately don't matter. I want to change that. We are in the stages of what they call the third industrial revolution. These things are separated by the technology that we use, and ours, for the third, is described by our adoption of the internet, computerized automation, and 3D printable technologies, and to our ability to connect like never before. Think of the pending half of the third industrial revolution to be the disbursement of the manufacturing ability to the layman and the changing of some deep-seated dynamics that we will get into in the next few slides. I know it's kind of a weird place to start a 3D printing conversation at, since this technology started in the 80s, but we are not looking carefully enough at this tool and all that it can do to change the dynamics that work against our very prosperous potential. These types of machines are the ability of every person to harvest the power of an industrial revolution in a box. This puts immense freedom into the hands of whoever wields it. This can be a great restructuring of society. If we learn how to utilize these tools, which will be a complication I speak about in a later slide, we will create a better society. But let's take a look about all the things that I'm bolstering about. We have a variety of machines available today. These machines started their developments in the 80s and have been breaking down in their cost and size since then. Just like the first computers, the first versions of these machines were large, cumbersome, the size of refrigerators. They were not considered investment items for the businesses, especially smaller ones. It wasn't until recently that these machines were viable for the rest of the consumer market, like the PC. These machines have increased their speed, usable materials, and alongside developments of processes that take items that used to take, hours to print and can now do it in minutes. For example, a company by the name of Carbon 3D created a new process called CLIP, or Continuous Liquid Interface Production, and it takes items that used to take a variation of 3 to 11 hours to print, depending on what production method you did use, and took it down to 6.5 minutes. These processes can involve lasers to fuse together powdered materials, extruded materials, that are those filaments that we're kind of familiar with, and then there's a liquid resin that is fused together with a variety of means. There are new processes and derivatives of each that are constantly evolving. We have the expense of these machines continuing to lower since the patents that surround some of them have finally expired and people are beginning to open source their designs. The most famous of this would be the riprap. The applications across this industry are really impressive. Think of all the variety of items that these machines can create. People have been using these machines to work in medicine, such as cheaper prosthetics, splints, and other items that have been used in real surgeries. From replacing stents for children to breathe, creating replacement hips, skin, organs through bioprinting, and even making drug compounds and pills. From systems like the REC, or the Willingham Robotic Exoskeleton. It's an assistive mechanism for the little girl pictured there. Her name is Emma, and she was born with a disease that made it so her arms were too heavy. The muscles were too weak to be able to move, so she wasn't able to play. She wasn't able to lift her arms up. She wasn't able to interact. And so they used 3D printing to take this REC exoskeleton and size it down to her little body, because she was only 2 when she needed it, and the other processes were not capable of making it to the design specifications. So with 3D printing and a lot of rubber bands, this little girl now is able to play, and she calls them her magic arms. It's really wonderful. And so now she can go to preschool and be more of the child that she was always supposed to be. And this is just looking at medicine. We have applicability to multiple industries: jewelry, fashion, arts, construction, energy, transportation, clothing, food, militarization, toys for children, weaponry, assistive and space colonization and construction, disaster relief efforts, and everywhere we could use just a little bit more freedom to produce. From hearing aids to shoes, we are beginning to see the fusing of these machines from other industries. Besides splintered production, that's kind of a term I made up, I think it also has relevance into the future. As markets diversify, localize, and utilize 3D printing technologies, more goods will be created that splinters the purchasing patterns in consumers, i.e., the variety of goods in the future where they can be created on demand will change some of our notions of shopping, advertising, and marketing. We can see it now. Think of the diversity efforts underway in advertising. We are tired of the Photoshop model that doesn't even look like herself, and we are seeing more inclusiveness in this goal. This will continue to happen as more people will be able to create the market that they envision using these tools. More individualized items and more personalized statistics will make a world that a consumer for each product, and this will change advertising, markets, and they'll become more focused to serve these emerging markets, or markets that have always been there, but we just have not been able to cater to them. As these goods change, mass manufacturing and 3D printing are often compared. However, under the splintered production ideals, then the need for mass manufacturing may condense, as the market is actually just changing. And 3D printing might not ever have to fully compete on scale with mass manufacturing in traditional regards, because it changes the nature of consumerism in the first place. But that's the thing with disruptive technology. It just changes many aspects of things. And it's not to say mass manufacturing will go away. I don't think it will. It would be in direct contradiction to the way that we are globally growing with each emerging nation and more people demanding more goods. It will just be changing and shifting the notions of shopping and experience with it. And here's the the thing I'm excited about. Okay. Here's the project I'm excited about, the Global Village construction set. They say on their website that they're not ready for like being shared, but they're doing fabulous research, and I'm not going to let their perfectionism hide themselves from me. This can be an industrial revolution in a box, and here's why. What this can represent specifically for everyone is the ability to access these tools at a lower cost. 3D printing overall is a type of mindset, but this specific actual application has me excited. They're open source ecology, and it takes society, the cost of society down. Now, this is called the GVCS, and it's a modular, do-it-yourself, low-cost, high-performance platform that allows easy fabrication of 50 different industrial machines that it takes to build a small, sustainable civilization with modern comforts. They began in 2007 with an earth brick press, and by 2013, they were using that machine and others to create a micro house. They're keeping an eye on the education necessary to use these items, and just like other aspects of educational technology, the education and teaching people how to utilize these things to their advantage will be the biggest barrier next to actually providing it. These items make it easier to level the playing field. It is easy for urbanization. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes. It's essentially teaching people. Many of the items, from what I read, that they can be taken apart and then assembled into other items. And so, like, you know, if you have one machine, you can maybe get some parts and build 5 different machines. So it's supposed to be modular, and that's what they mean by that. So this type of dynamic here will make it easier to urbanize and reinvest into communities by nations that have already been established, and make the ability for new communities to take care of themselves. This can increase entrepreneurialism and innovation. Using 3D printed technologies, the amount of time that it takes to receive custom parts is dramatically reduced. Let's say someone was inventing something. They would need to make a model, send it to the company, wait for it by mail, and then see if the parts actually work. Using 3D printed technologies, this trend is reversed. This means that we now have faster and lower cost of production, and makes it easier to have more iterations of a design. This means that we have a more liberalized market for entrepreneurialism and innovation. This makes it easier for investors and tinkerers to just join in. And this slide is about the economy. Setting up the stage of where 3D printing can be most useful. We have a mindset in our current economy. According to The Divine Right of Capital by Marjorie Kelly, we learn principles of the economic aristocrats. These take the form of our worldview, where we think the aim of a corporation is to pay stockholders as much as possible and employees as little as possible. The stockholders have untold privilege and claim wealth with very little effort. With the lack of understanding how corporations are embedded into their communities, we can see property battles ensue, where those of more modest means are unable to participate. What is most apparent in this concept of aristocratic economics is that corporations don't owe liberty to anyone but the stockholders. Employees are seen as an expense and something to be subjugated. Fired and replaced at the whim of a company is the reality of many. Finally, there is a principle of sovereignty, where the claim that they are private and the free market will regulate it itself, and we know how effective that can be. On the other side of the spectrum, we have principles of economic democracy, the first of which is said to be enlightenment, where all persons are created equal, and economic rights of the employees and the communities are equal to the capital owners. This gives employees more opportunity for wages, community input, such as the decision to move a factory away, and it would be more ideal towards the concept of self-regulation. If people actually had the ability to go to their neighbor and push for the regulation of the industry, how long do you think it would really take up to clean up the industries that create polluted air, water, and environment? The second of these principles for economic democracy has to do with equality, where wealth is not viewed solely as the pocket lining of the stockholder. The community has a cost, the environment has a cost, and the corporate wealth is not viewed as only belonging to one group. It goes to the community, the worker, and those who help to create it. With economic democracy, there's an understanding and obligation to perform public good. Public corporations have an obligation to act fairly on the behalf of the communities and people of which they are founded in. Another of these principles for economic democracy is the notice for the need of democratic leadership in corporations, justice in the treatment of people, and the ability to alter or abolish corporations that help govern our world, should they find a lack of respect for it and a fundamental lack of understanding of the dangers that they create. Now, how do we achieve this? How do we create democracy in our economy, in a corporate world? There are things like employee stock ownership plans, ESOP. And these are where employees receive stock. And this can have benefits, but it also has its contradictions. This correlates economic sovereignty to those who own. Stocks as the form of property, and with property ownership comes privilege. And this will continue this thought process into the future. And there are more examples, but just trying to wrap our head around the fact that we can have democracy and capitalism and for corporations is something that people don't understand at first sight. So for this, Marjorie Kelly points out in The Divine Right of Capital, as both quantum theory and chaos theory teaches us, the next state of the world is fundamentally not knowable. Our economy is too complex, change is too rapid, and political climate too hostile, and reform efforts too early for anyone to say what the endpoint of economic democracy will look like. What we know is that the viability of society comes with asking these questions and for aiming for these types of reconstructions. It is not as if it doesn't have merit. A study from the New York Stock Exchange estimated that the productivity of the United States would go up by 20% if companies did implement employee decisions and wealth sharing. It's more productive fundamentally because people work harder for something they know will actually give them something back. And this is incredibly significant. For just a simple shift in our understanding of economy, we can have so much more prosperity. As we will learn later, it will become more and more viable alongside these changes in technology. Now, some of these ideas may be weird, but without this critical investment in this conversation, then we can see a lack of progress. The total backwards progression, once you start to fail hard enough, if we don't have a discussion about what we need to do to move our economy forward. We need to integrate these principles to create more resiliency. We need to reinvest in them actually again, because we did used to invest in the things that can create this type of thing. But the question comes, how do we create resiliency into the economy? First, it's done through the things that we know, investment in education, and then infrastructure and the community. Once we have a healthy community beating, we can begin to look for economic resiliency. It's kind of like the discussion, which came first, the chicken or the egg. For some, it will be the lack of resiliency in the economy that drives the adoption of these tools, which then is properly utilized can help instill the community and the needed items for success, versus a community that adopts it to continue being healthy. Second, we need to talk about communities in general. They are the next subject to really be used to revive 3D, they are our next subject to really revive with 3D printing, as these technologies create more self-sufficiency for communities. But first, let's just touch base on this. How does this relate to 3D printing? First, with more increased innovation and the ability for more people to go into business for themselves, we will see more small business that hopefully can grow larger. From this local level, we can create economic democracy and shift our models as these local companies grow. Second, these tools can be utilized to rebuild communities, interest people in the ability to make change happen, and put restless energy to use. There's a lot that needs to be done in society, and many feel like they want to make a difference. We just don't have easily accessible means to do so. Once we propel society dedicated to take care of its own people forward, like it's such a crazy belief a society should do so, then we can help it become more independent. These technologies will continue to integrate and change our notions of our current economic and societal structure. That's my favorite. We need to bring communities back together. I like to think of it as resurrecting a community consciousness. It is the duty of the community to take care of each other, to propel each other to the greatest definitions of their success. How do you expect to benefit from society if you're not willing to invest in it? What should the purpose of a society be? Servitude to our corporate masters for the sake of profit alone? That is a narrowed version of what I consider to be the potential of humanity. We need to bring people together again for a common goal, not hatred or divisiveness, but unity and peace. We know we have the potential to get there, especially because this helps us at an economic level. Look at the localization multiplier. Small and medium-sized businesses articulate more money through the system. They have higher localization multipliers because the money goes from small businesses to more small businesses and helps its own self. And what we essentially have today are states and communities paying out billions and millions of dollars to Walmart in the sense of economic development to have these large corporations come and build stores and create jobs. But what happens to these stores? They're closing down within 5 years, and they just spent millions of dollars to get a bid that didn't serve their community. And so this is a complicated thing to study. Most economic development places are struggling to implement these ideas because the data is not there, and if it is there, it's not being analyzed. We need to shift our understanding of economic development and a study of civil economics that compared the economic impact of local versus non-local banks, grocers, pharmacies, and full-service restaurants. It found that local businesses in each sector recirculated significantly more revenue. This ranged from 17% for grocery stores and up to 77% for pharmacies. For some communities, it is suffice to say that just a 10% shift in the spending for economic development to local businesses and sectors could increase the new amount of jobs for a labor intensiveness and more competitive wages. One such way we can begin to think about our ability to rethink economic development is rethinking of what our definition of prosperity should be. Prosperity now is viewed successfully if our false notions of success are met, such as financial speculation instead of investing into communities and local business, who systematically employ more individuals. One way we can begin this thought process and changing the way that we look at our economy is the GNH. That is the Gross National Happiness Index, and that started in the 70s from a former king of Butt-Tam, and it is conceived on 4 pillars. It is good governance, sustainable socioeconomic development, preservation and promotion of culture, and environmental conservation. It has to do with the actual health of the society and people. It has to do with their happiness and the well-being of communities. It is not simply the continual blind gaze to the corporate profit as being the only indicator of health in communities. Should we begin to measure R, G, and H, I wonder how we would score. Well, we already know that. In 2012, a report was done by the UN, and it showed that the United States scored 10th. And you know what? I'm willing to bet right now we're not number one. We are going to have to change things. If we need to change the way we view things and look at things and understand things in order to help change the tide for our society in order to be more positive and more productive. Okay, so there's some really cool developments within more of a sustainable economy that would be enabled by 3D printing. First is the complete connection between our waste and our ability to produce. As previously mentioned, we have filaments and materials that can be made from like waste products, items such as there's filaments that are made from leftover coffee grounds, or there's filaments that are made from leftover materials from beer production. There's just a lot of things that we can use. Recycling saves 75% of the energy compared to what it takes to mine materials out of the earth, refine it, not to mention the massive savings in greenhouse emissions creation from condensing of the manufacturing plane. This condensing of this manufacturing and supply is coming. People will be able to go to a store and have items printed on demand, purchase them and have them produced locally and then saving shipping and production costs for the creator themselves. And that's in addition to people maybe having a machine at home. They purchase something and it prints right at home. Originally, and this will enable a new green economy. Originally, mined materials are sent to one country for refinement, to another for the creation of the part, and yet to another for the assembly of the good. Finally, the good then goes around the world to where the demand is. This process has many environmental emissions that no one is willing to take responsibility for. With the adoption of these technologies, there will be a shift in the supply chain and a disruption to the production and hopefully lessening of environmental degradation. One more advantage that 3D printing will distinctly hold in the future is that it is additive manufacturing based. Subtractive manufacturing takes materials away from an object to create it. With the additive, we are making precise goods and have less waste. As the world continues to globalize and developing and emerging nations come into play, the more materials that we can save on a global scale and over the long term are now more important than ever. Once again, this is something that 3D printing can completely foster, alongside the reuse of materials through filament makers. Once again, what is more important is that people actually learn about the manufacturing process. They will know more of its impact and they will understand what they are doing to their community. With the localization of creation, we will see more loyalty to the community and the surrounding area. If someone doesn't like your polluting, they can knock on your door. This is everyone's world, not just a thing to be ruled by a single class of people, but something to be shared so that everyone has equal opportunity to success and happiness. With 3D printing and all of these wonderful trends, I believe we can do something like this. Now, let's move into how this will manifest itself into helping developing and emerging economies. According to a book called Poor Economics, we have a lot of statistics that really want to make us work towards progress for the developing world. They say that every year 9 million children die before their 5th birthday. A woman in sub-Saharan Africa has a 1 in 30 chance of dying while giving birth. We have it at 1 in every 5,600 births for developing nations. For developed nations. The average life expectancy is 55 years old, and in countries like India alone, they project that more than 50 million school-going children cannot read a very simple text. These types of items are almost part of a society that's changing and growing, or at least they are for now. And we know that in the United States, our systems are not serving individuals as well as they could, and we are seeking to cut funding to an incredibly important institution that will only stunt the growth potential for this nation. So, people think of the world as only the G7, which before the financial crisis, it was kind of the way the world was just considered, but now we have the G20. The G7 was originally Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the US, and the UK, but now we have the G20, and they are the original stated countries, plus developing ones like South Korea, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Argentina, South Africa, Turkey, and Indonesia, and just quite a few other countries. With just moving China and India alone into this idea, we're moving 40% of the world's population into the sustained high growth category. This balance has tipped, making the majority of the world move towards becoming on par with developed nations. They predict that these emerging economies and developing nations will start to, especially India and China, will start to reach advanced country wages by 2050 or so. And this makes every environmental issue that we have just compact further. These types of technologies could represent one of the most effective ways to build society. See, when a country is going through that sustained growth period and they're becoming advanced, they go through something called the middle income transition. And this is where countries go from earning $5,000 to $10,000. And that's where, at that $10,000 mark, income starts to compound, and then you have a faster increase in the advancing level of the nation. But this is a very critical time. This country, it's considered a critical time for a nation because it's very easy to become derailed due to multiple dynamics. But with more access to knowledge and platforms to train people that are online based and materials and machines that can be created locally and easily, then we have a greater change coming to our society for these technologies, and they represent a great potential, especially for that middle income transitions. But really, how do we industrialize? It wasn't just the process of harvesting coal from the ground that started the Industrial Revolution for Britain. There need to be underlying variables that played into the ability for this to take off. There needs to be access to education, ability for markets to be invested in, community stability, and governmental stability. We need to see fundamental urbanization and infrastructure development to support communities that are being created. The system is a bit complicated, but to simply put, to make an industrialized society, you need to invest in education. The education funds workers. Education becomes more effective, and human capital increases. Private sector investment return rises. Foreign direct investment expands. Taxes and governmental revenues go up. Infrastructure investment expands, and then education investment increases again. And the cycle can continue, and this is literally how you create a functional society. But looking back to this open source ecology, that global village construction set, the reason that this type of research is exciting is that it can help take that ability to disseminate needed materials. What could we do if our aid package was just the GVCS? Well, as we've seen, it can be kind of complicated. It's not just the need of tools, but the need of education and guidance. If we want to create a better society, we have to start being better people. These tools and the interconnectedness of our world through the internet will be something that is a critical challenge to us in these less than ideal times. But we can overcome them. Leveling inequality. Our society is failing to take care of its most vulnerable. And I find there's something to be culturally sick about that. We need to be more empathetic as human beings. And I'm not going to waste my time to discuss the disparaging wealth inequality in this country. We know we have it at a systematic level. And I'm not asking the people who created this type of inequality to fix it. They're too selfish and lazy. That's why I believe in what 3D printing technology represents, which is fundamentally fueled by the personal computing movement, and this teaches us that we can change society for ourselves. We can utilize these tools to create a social system that we actually need to foster a nation that serves the axioms of which it was founded upon. Let me be clear. If it was in the best interest of everyone in this country to be as successful as they possibly could be, then everyone would be as successful as they possibly could be. We have a thought process in this country where someone becomes less of an American and has less citizenry the moment they start to go down the rungs of the social ladder, especially when they start to fail economically. It's easier to dismiss their experiences, underestimate the damage of the things they are subjected to, and we harden ourselves against showing sympathy for their experiences. Now, all right, I'm going to get off this little soapbox and onto the analytical box. In order to have this prosperous economy that does serve the needs of the most vulnerable, there needs to be a key investment in what we know is important: community, infrastructure, and education. Further, we need to realize that trickle-down economics has just failed this nation. We need to realize the fault within trickle-down economics, but there are other aspects of our economic system that need restructured in order to continue fueling the growth of our strapped middle class. We have wonderful things to look forward to should we actually play our cards right. We can level inequality in this nation by changing some very simple notions of how a business runs. As technology automates and we shift to a more universal basic income technique, I honestly hope we could see a renaissance, at least, a maker renaissance that helps people explore all of their potential. This could be spurred on by an internet-based global economy that we're building now, and we have been building. Even if someone is making local goods with a 3D printer, it's not a wild stretch of the imagination to sell to someone in another country, especially when we have a disconnected production model where that person is able to print your good in their house or at a store down the road from you. And this blurs the line between what is actually viewed as a global economy, but that was the purpose of becoming a global economy in the first place. This will continue to change notions of shopping, but also notions of charity. People in this pending era will have the opportunity to have basic goods in times of need. Just as we were toying with the idea of universal basic income, these trends will continue to evolve in our ability to solve the problem of inequality. That can be through the era of abundance and the ability to honestly quit being selfish and start to share. Many of these trends will work along other technological ones. Let's consider artificial intelligence. Proponents today will short-sightedly say that people will be constrained on their ability, to work with 3D printing because they're not able to model items or won't be able to understand them. With AI use of the future, we will see the quickened methods of production, one where you have the AI build the model and then it is printed. We will also need to consider the large-scale impact of automation. As corporations are trained to kill costs whenever possible in this pursuit, less and less people will be utilized or underutilized in the positions that they are in. In order to create a more functional society, we need to use 3D printing technologies to empower these people to do more for their communities, and is going to be needed because they are going to be displaced. We then have this total idea. We have the little pieces. We have the communities that need refocusing, ecological constraints, and a decision and a decisive need for economics that restructure the wealth generation to be oriented towards the community. A sustainably based, localized, generative economy is this focus. By following the principles of economic democracy and renewed focus for economic development, we begin to bring something new into focus for ourselves. Our economy, societal stability, and personal well-being may well hinge on it. Within our lifetimes, we will most likely begin to see the start of the fourth industrial revolution. It has a lot to do with some of the trends that we're bringing up now, artificial intelligence and 3D printing. And this can change the tone of the conversation to one of empowerment. We will ride the wave for the rest of the third industrial revolution and catch renewed fervor with the beginning of the fourth. We know what we can do to create a healthy society. With our growing global connectedness, then I believe that these benefits will be shared even faster, with more of those who are in need than we ever could have before. I believe that these tools can change our future. They are the future, and it is just up to shape it to what it is supposed to be. We just need a vision. I'm trying to stand up for a different one than most people might imagine, because there is still hope. No matter how this society is set up, we can transform it for tomorrow. It's not to say that this will appear overnight. We have a lot of issues that need to be contended with, and change doesn't happen overnight. But we do have a potential to change every aspect. There are some things we should keep an eye on, though. There's regulation of this industry. We shouldn't restrict the opportunities to utilize this type of technology, and we need to create open educational opportunities. But we should be aware of some of the potential problems, such as the ability for someone to save a few bucks and repair an item with a modification of a less durable material or of the not right type. People could create dangerous items such as guns, and this can be alarming in two regards. First, there's pretty much the complete deregulation of what someone is limited to be able to print, and they can get these models or they can make them. Secondly, even if they make a functional item like a gun, and they could have it and then use it, and it could backfire, harming them in the process. So we have some issues within this that we need to address before they actually bite us in the bud. We have industries that simply do not have enough qualified individuals for these positions. The same thing that is restricting technology will restrict 3D printing, and so we need to foster educational opportunities so this industry doesn't hit the same bumps. Since this could really be a tool to contend for a society to adopt technological education, I think that the reasons to not have more technologically current curriculum for students around the world continues to dwindle. Not that there were many people contending against it in the first place, but now we really need to look at this as a critical investment tool for our society. Alongside that, we still need to evolve these tools. Charles Hull is the father of 3D printing and was in the 90s predicting that this industry would need a few more decades to mature and then reach more mainstream awareness. And he was right, but even he is quoted in saying that he is surprised at how long the technology he's quoted in saying that even he is surprised at how much the market has changed. He didn't think that there would be 3D printed organs in all these items that we have today. But just as we don't know the outcome of integrating more democracy into the workplace or more justly, we don't know completely how it will play out, the same can be said of 3D printing. And many of these trends I have pointed out. It comes to the difference that people can make. And sometimes we're pretty meh. But we can overcome that. I don't want to see innovation stifled, be limited by external means, or the potential of people to be lessened. To transform the future, we must transform our outlook and begin to look at things differently about how we are going to structure society, especially surrounding the amazing tools that we can utilize here. So, what do you call it when you keep pursuing a goal when you yourself have trouble finding your own faith to keep pursuing the goal? What is it when your dream and your hope is just a thin thread that you cling to and you assume failure waits you on the other side of bringing your dreams to fruition? In all of its vulnerability and in all of its simplicity, I think that this feeling represents the American dream. They neglect to tell you that sometimes it feels like akin to chewing glass, but for most, even having the ability to pursue something like this is a farce. It's a Hail Mary to what we thought that we could create as a society and what you thought you pledged your allegiance to. The American dream should be a rallying cry that we push every citizen to bring them to the greatest definitions of their success. But we know we do not. We are at a transitionary period in our society, nationally and globally, which is why things are so chaotic. We have a future to live, and it's not the one manifesting in front of us now. It is not isolationist, vindictive, hateful, subjugating, disrespectful, disempowering, or authoritarian. It can be radically different if we are able to take heed of high technologies, education surrounding it, and the igniting of innovation through the opening of doors that have just occurred recently. Now, is this something solely reserved for the American dream? No. This is a global technology that can take the pursuits of freedom, prosperity, peace, and happiness and spread them around the world. Yes, of course, it is a girl with dreads, standing behind this idea. But I'm not the only person to notice these trends. This is an obsession with the dream of equality that I expect each citizen to tangibly secure for themselves. It is what's driven me to do this speech. Even though it's kind of unorthodox, even for a security conference. So what do I mean by hack the future? Besides serving as a lazy shoehorn for this specific conference, it represents what we really do need to do to make the future work. We need to do something different in this nation to focus our discontent with aspects of our overlying system, or else we will continue this degree of polarization that does not serve us. And that's all I have, so thank you. I'm actually going to be doing a book on this, so if you guys go to that website, you can get like pre-sale information. So I don't know. I think it's going to release. I'm going to release it in like the next 3 months. So that's where we're at. If you guys have any questions. Pardon? What? You do. You turn it out. It might take a little bit of time. Anyone have any questions? Megabot did that bullshit stuff in 2012. I hope people take it out and not stop. I don't think. Yeah, no, but like